All right, hello, fellow coder. Welcome to this next lesson where we're going to be diving into, continuing our task, which is to build a full stack web application from scratch utilizing React as a front end and Spring Boot via Java and a MySQL database in the back end. For this app, in this particular lesson, we're diving into more topics on using Bootstrap inside of React, a CSS framework, and we are going to talk more about how to lay out components, lay out the elements on the screen utilizing what Bootstrap is good at. So if you want to learn more about React, Bootstrap, and Flexbox and whatnot, stick around. You might enjoy this lesson. All right, so let's get started with our app the way it is. We have outlined we have this one login button. But what I was saying in the last episode is when it's on a small screen, ideally the login button should maybe be a bit bigger, because if you're on a mobile screen, you don't have that little tiny button to push. So it'd be more ideal if that login button was bigger. And vice versa, when you're on a large screen like this, you really don't need these text boxes to be this big. So that's sort of the areas that I want to adjust. So how could we accomplish that? Well, that's what Bootstrap is all about. So Bootstrap has again, they have great documentation, and they do talk about how they leverage Flexbox as well. So you can actually use Flexbox with Bootstrap now, which is nice. And that is all done via classes. So you add classes to bring in Flexbox. Now you can also use grid as well. Like if you do dgrid and hit and save, boom, it creates a grid out of the column that you have here. So that login button wraps the whole or spans the whole length of the box that it is inside of. And if you make it large, then it does the same thing. Now I personally have more experience using Flexbox, but just to show you can use grid as well. There's lots of grid related stuff you can do. But let me just remove that for a moment to go back to where we were, and let me add one more element here, one more column, and rather not an element. Add one more button in here. So we'll have not a login button, but rather a button to just sort of exit, if you will. And we'll make the variant color on this, meaning it just changes the color to be a secondary. So that will make it sort of like a gray color. And again, all that is, you can reference that and what I just did via the Bootstrap documentation. They have they talk about primary, secondary, whatever. Different types of colors that you can assign. And when you click on this button, basically all that's going to do, the on click is just going to do a window location href and maybe send them back to the home screen, right? So when we save that, boom, now we have an exit button. If we click on it, it sends us back to the home page. We go back and here we are. So yeah, as you can see, this doesn't look great, right? We have these two buttons, and if we bring grid back, again, just to show you what grid might look like, that's how it lays it out. It sort of lays it out in this column type format, and we can mimic the same thing using Flex. So instead of using grid, we can use Flex. So the first thing you do is you say dflex, and that'll bring Flexbox in, but we haven't defined anything yet, so it will just use all the defaults of Flexbox. So the defaults right now for Flex is that it's going to lay the components out in a row, whereas the grid sort of laid things out in columns. So we can change that. We can say, hey, we want to make Flex use column layout instead of row layout. Because again, right now it's using a row, and it's putting all the elements it can into the one row that you're given. When you do the same thing with a column, you flip the axis this way, and then you can sort of do the same thing with the elements. So when we say flex column, it sort of gives the same thing as before that we had with using grid. And then, as you can see, the buttons being really close together, you can add a gap. So you can say gap, and then how big of a gap you want. So you say gap 1, 2, 3, and save, 4, and save, and 5. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't really know what the best layout is. That's subjective, but I guess we can put a big gap between them. But here's the thing, though. When you make it big, this doesn't look good anymore. I kind of would like the log and the exit button to go back to maybe a row layout, and maybe have them not be right next to each other, so we can actually bring in more concepts from Bootstrap to make this happen. Bootstrap outlines different sizes of screens for you, and it has these keywords that you can use, these two letters that you can put together to say, on this size of screen, I want you to do this thing, right? So right now, by default, we are just using deflex and flex column and gap 5. These are just going to say, hey, from the smallest size screen to the largest size screen, do exactly what we've said here. So that's going to be not that helpful. So that's not that helpful right now. It's good on a small screen, but not on a big screen. So how can we make it change when you have a bigger screen? Well, you can say, first of all, you can say flex MD for medium, and then you can say row, I believe. Let me save that, see if it breaks anything. So what that means is, instead of saying flex column for all size of screens, change it back to row when you hit a medium-sized screen. So let's just see if this works. As we drag it and make it bigger, whoop, see what happened there? So we've hit the medium-sized screen now. This is small, this is medium. Small, medium, small, medium. And you see here it has the gap between them. But maybe I don't want that kind of gap. Maybe I want a bigger gap. Maybe I want the exit button to be all the way over here on the other side of the screen. We can do that as well with something called justify content. So we could say justify content, and then there's a bunch of different variations on how do you want to justify it. Do you want to justify content like center? You can say center and put it in the center. You can say justify content, I think right, or maybe it's end. I forget. No, it's end, I think. You can put them on the end. You can say space between, and this is the one I think we're going to land on. When I save that, it puts space, as much space as it can between the objects or the elements, as much as it can. And then there's another one called, around. So you can say content around, which kind of puts space to the left of the element. So it puts like sort of margin or padding around all of the stuff. So there's all these different variations that you can use. But anyway, justify content between looked great, right? That's sort of what we're going for. Does that affect our thing here? No, it doesn't. But if it did affect our smaller size screen here, what we could do is we could say justify content on medium screens to be between, to just sort of solidify what we mean by that. So that way it's going to be different on each one. So there you go. That's sort of a little, little, not deep dive, a shallow dive into some of the flex stuff that you can do with Bootstrap, which is nice. And you can get, that didn't take too long for me to lay it all out. Now, you have to play around with it a bit to get good at it. All right, sorry, I had to pause there for a second. Someone knocked on my door. So now the next thing I wanted to chat about, if I didn't already finish that last thought, I had to play around with this for like about an hour or so. And I have familiarity with Bootstrap 4. This is leveraging Bootstrap 5, which has some additional features, which were nice. So I played around with them for about an hour, and this is sort of the gist that I got from playing around with it, what you see here in front of you. Now, excuse me, when we make the screen bigger, I also said that I kind of wanted to cap the size of the text boxes here, right? The text boxes spanning the entire screen is a bit much. So let's play around with that. Now, I haven't played around with this yet, so you have to bear with me if I stumble around in doing this, but that's where a lot of the learning happens. So one thing that I've noticed previously while I was playing around was when you go to the F12 window here, it says there's a warning, control ID is ignored on form control when ID is specified. Control ID is when ID is specified on form control. So this is the ID here, username. So I guess maybe I should have put username here for the control ID. And then maybe that would have done something for the HTML4 because I see, control ID is ignored when HTML4 is used. So I'm wondering if control ID, I can stick that in there. And then maybe I don't need to use HTML4 or ID in here. Maybe that will suffice. So same with password here. Maybe I don't need HTML4 and I don't need ID. I don't know if that's going to break everything. Let's see. So if I click username, oh good, it still selects good. So that still looks like it will work. That's advantageous. So now I can clear this out, refresh, and now, cool. Now we don't have any of those warnings. I just wanted to, tidy that up. And now I want to cap the width of the text boxes here. So how do we do that? Well, the text box is, I assume it's either part of the form group or it's just the control. But I think I want to sort of cap it for the entire group, but we'll see what happens. So it's the same thing. We're adding a class or classes to the class name property here. So we want to control the size of the, actually I might be lying. We want to control the size of the element in the form group, but in terms of the maximum width. So we could use a maximum width control on something like a style, and there might be a class name to do that, but the other way that you can do that is via the rows and columns, right? Because with columns, you can specify, let me move this form group up into this column and save it and see if it changes anything. Doesn't look like anything changed on the view. And this one's for the password. Let me make it bigger. So the password looks the same as above. So we didn't break anything by adding the row and the column in there. One thing that I will do though is you can, for the column, you can say something like, okay, on a medium-sized screen, I want you to just use 6 columns instead. Okay, so let's see what happens if that changes the look and the feel. And as you can see, the password is now a different size from the username. So we are capping the column here on a medium-sized screen or larger. That's how this works. So medium or larger will now be capped at 6 columns instead of 12. Okay, so we can do that same thing above here. For this form group, we can have the row and column specifically for the use case of making it capped in terms of its size. So again, same thing. On a medium screen, make it only 6. Okay. Now, as you can see, the bottom row here is not capped at 6. So it's going to span the entire space because we did not cap it either. So we can do that here by saying same thing, column, medium screen, 6 in size. Okay. So then your form becomes a little bit more reasonable as the screen is bigger. And then as we get smaller, it starts to get maybe a little bit too small there. I don't know. And then it's cool on the extra small and small screens. So maybe for medium, we don't want it to be capped at 6. Maybe we want medium to be 8. 8. And we want large to be 6. Right? Large and then extra large. Large is 6. So if I say save, it gets a little bit bigger on a medium-sized screen. You see what happened there? These got a little bit bigger on the medium. So again, small looks good. Medium, pretty good, looks good. And then large. See? Boom, boom. See they get bigger? Boom, boom. So now that's 8 columns in width for the larger screen. All right? The large screen is 8. Medium is here at 6, I think. And then small is, or extra small is the full 12 columns. So that's sort of the mindset that you have to be in when you're working with mobile responsive design. You need to test what it looks like with your browser, at least, on the screen as you sort of click and drag it around. Okay? That's sort of my philosophy for testing things out. The other thing that we can do here is maybe we can center this this screen. That's just a little thing that I'm noticing. Oops, let me go back to where is my login? In the container, we can probably say justify content center. We might need to do Flexbox. Let me see. Yeah, we need to bring in dflex as well. Dflex. Oh shoot. Okay, that's just gonna lay out. Okay. So don't do that. That's just going to lay out all of the elements in a row format, unless we say what is it? No, flex column. That's probably not going to work either. Interesting. So let's not do justify content center. We might be able to say text center, which is just a regular old center. No, that centers the text. So maybe not in the container then. Although I would like to put it on the container. This is like the very common and funny. Oops, I got rid of. Hold on. This is the very common and funny, you know, things that you always see people struggle with is how do you center things on a screen in HTML? And then you see senior level programmers struggling just like I am. So yeah, the struggle is real, ladies and gentlemen. So basically, I don't know how important it is to try to center this guy, but basically in the HTML, what do we have? I'm gonna look at the body. We have, oh right, we're just looking at React as a single page app, so that's not going to help us too much. So how would I do this? The container, when I tried to do text center, didn't actually center stuff. If I tried to wrap everything in a div, which is kind of like what a container is anyway, so I'm just playing around here. I'm spitballing is the word. So if I wrap everything in a div and save, it doesn't change anything. And if I, well, this looks centered right now. There. If I add class name text center, is it just gonna do the same thing that happened last time with, yeah, it just centers the text. Is it align center? Actually, it's probably align, right? It's probably deflex align center. No, that does the same thing. That is not what I want. And if I make it grid, that's going to make it do nothing. Interesting. So how would I center all of these components? Isn't this fun, guys? This is just, it's just so much fun. If I were to do this, it's interesting that I can't select the actual, I guess because it's there. Yeah. Container. So this div, again, if I just say text align center, it just centers the text. Okay. And I'm assuming that's because these guys are already, I'm not sure why that, usually that works. The other thing we can do is like a margin auto thing. I forget. Margin, sorry. Zero auto or auto and zero. No, not doing anything. So this is where we fall back on, you know, how to center a form on screen, Bootstrap. This is, you know, this is the name of the game, guys. People always, when I'm teaching my people in my boot camp, by the way, if you don't know about the boot camp that I do, you can check it out by coderscampus.com/bootcamp, coderscampus.com/bootcamp. And yeah, this is, people are always too scared to you know, admit out loud that they had to Google something as simple as how do you center, you know, a form on the screen. I have no shame. This is, I just know this is what happens in the real world. Working with, you know, senior level people, it's always like, I can't, you know, we can't store all this in our brains all the time, and we just have to reference it, right? We've done it before, and we can do it again. We just need to reference it somewhere. So let's see, what are they suggesting here? So border radius, width, padding, div to align. Okay, so there's a lot of noise going on here. Just tell me. H100 container. So they do say justify content center and align item center. Align item center. So let me get rid of the divs because it looks like they're putting it right on the container. And for the container, we'll say, are they bringing in, because this is like Flex, but it doesn't look like they're using Flex here. Let's see what happens if I don't use Flex and I just say, now this is Bootstrap 4, so let me just say justify content center without using deflex on the container. So we'll just use justify content center and see, does that just doesn't do anything, right? Because we're not using Flex. And they also say align item center. Let's see. No, it doesn't do anything. Row. Oh, they're saying do that on the row, not on the container. Okay, my bad. Let's remove this and put it on the row. Class name. Oh, that's just the first row. Interesting. So when you do it on the row, it works, but that's kind of annoying because I want it to apply to all of the rows. So then would I go back to just doing, I feel like I just go back to using a div and use this class name on the div, right? And then move the rows up into that div. Oops. Move the rows up into, let me try the first row and see if it does anything. See, it doesn't work. On the div it doesn't, but on the row it does. That's annoying. I don't like that, but that's the name of the game, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so if I just do this, it centers as I would have expected it to center. Okay, so let's get rid of the div. The reason why I don't love this as a solution is because now I need to copy paste the same thing over and over again, right? For every row that I add, I need to add a class name of justify content center. I don't need the other one of align items, I don't think. So there you go. I've centered the divs, plural. I would have liked to have been able to do that with one line of code, but you know, I guess we'll just have to put it on every single row. The other hack that I can think of here, what about this hack? What if we had a row, and then I'll stop the video. What if we have a row with one column, and we do our justify content center on this row, and then put everything inside of this one column without this justify content center on each of the rows here, right? I really should be using shortcut keys to select everything and do this, but anyway. Okay, let me move this up into the scope of the column. So now we have a row and a column spanning everything. Nothing changed there. No, it doesn't work. All right, I give up. I'll go back to what I had before. So there's a reason behind this. I don't know the reason behind why it's not working, and I could do research to find out, but ultimately speaking, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze on that one. But there we go. We have it working. Everything is centered. It looks a little bit nicer, in my opinion. So now the next step here is to go on and apply these learnings to the subsequent screens that we'll have in our application. So when I log into the application, I don't remember what I don't remember the credentials for logging into my own application. Can I go to dashboard? Sorry, dashboard. Do I still have the? Okay, good. I still have the what you call it in my oh no, it says unauthorized. Interesting. So I'm allowed to see the screen for some reason, even though I haven't logged in. But when I click on it, nothing works anyway. Okay, so I need to remember what my credentials are for logging in, and then we will start to apply some of our learnings into this part of the application with respect to the Bootstrap stuff, making this part a little bit prettier and starting to add some more functionality to our application. So that's what I will, eventually get to in the next lesson. Thanks for sticking with me and watching me struggle. Always a pleasure. Take care of yourself. As always, happy learning, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel when you want to see and get notified of the next video in this series when it comes out. So looking forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.